Khushnooma, and thank you so much
Hi,
for doing
Mansi. Thank you so much. Thank you for having me on the show.
it.
Thank
Right.
you.
Khushnooma, I want you to step back a little and tell me what what was the starting point of drafting that letter, right? So walk us back to when it all started and your
Sure.
journey so far.
Yeah, so actually, it was the April 14th, like I've mentioned in my letter, when, we were having just a normal day in our lives, and the day kind of ended absolutely with no alarm bells, nothing. It was the completion of a day like we've had our days. And it was about 3 o'clock in the morning when my daughter walks into our room, and she said she had fever, and we were a little okay about it because she's probably been exhausted. She was studying really hard. She was burning the midnight oil, and so we kind of administered a paracetamol for her at about 3 o'clock in the morning, and she kind of went off to sleep. At 8 in the morning, she came back saying she's lost her sense of smell, she's lost her sense of taste. She was pretty uneasy the entire night, and these are very, very common symptoms, and it was kind of inevitable. But we did the test. We immediately called a technician and we did the test, and we didn't want to take any chances with her because her boards were right around the corner. And so she tested positive. We kind of isolated her. We were quarantined ourselves. And everything was being observed just the way it needed to be observed. Now, we don't live in palatial houses in
Right.
Bombay, right? So there's always that thing looming on right behind you that, the other child should not get affected. So
Right.
we were keeping him very, very, away from her. I was the only one who was interacting with her around 8 to 9 days. It was about, I think, about 23rd of April. We had a assignment in school. We had to bake a cake for William Shakespeare's birthday, and we did all of that. We baked a pound of flesh cake for Shylock, and we recorded videos, and we were having a very fun evening. And then at about 11:30, we retired for the day. And it was 2 o'clock when he woke my husband up and he said, I'm feeling extremely uneasy. Now, the natural process of thought was that he's exhausted. He's had a very late, very exhausting evening doing all of this. And he's just the kind of child who's extremely effervescent and,
Right.
always hyper. So
Right.
we
And
put
how
him
old
to
is he, if I may
He's
ask?
11. He's
He's 11.
11. He's 11. He's in the sixth standard. And we put him to bed. And then the fever started raging at 10 in the morning. And it just accelerated. It was about 103,
Yeah.
103. And it just kind of, through the day, it did not ebb at all. And we kept administering paracetamols. Again, both my husband and I are not the paranoid kind of individuals. Fever is just something that children get. We're not new parents either, right? So we don't tend to get extremely worked up about these situations either. This was Friday, Saturday, Sunday, the fever just did not relent. And we kept, doing the cold compressions and everything. Now, what
Did you
was
did
the
you test him? Did you decide to
No,
test
we
him
did
as well?
not. We did not. Because we kind of just assumed that he had tested positive or he
Right.
just had a bad viral infection. At that point, we had not tested him. However, I do want to state that my husband has antigen tests at home, which we did do and which was negative. But nevertheless, they are 50% accurate and they are not foolproof. The thing that was kind of ticking in my brain was the fact that even with fever, a child does not become listless to this extent. And he was just not waking up at all. The only thing we would be able to do is, up till that point, he was even able to take a bath on his own. He was able to brush his teeth. He was able to come out in the in the living room and sit with us. However, on Monday, my husband did not want to take chances. He was like, let's just do a battery of blood tests as well as, the RT-PCR. The blood test was to rule out any malaria, any typhoid, all of those things. Now, when his reports came, he tested negative for COVID, and which was a little it was like a real shock, right? Because we were like, that was the most normal, diagnosis that he had tested positive because I already had my daughter positive at home.
Right.
And the vitals were kind of not normal, but they were not abnormal. But then what happened as a consequence of that day after day was he developed a lymph node in his neck. Even then, everybody, and but the fever went away on Tuesday. So what was the other conclusion? The fact that the fever has subsided, but the body has come up with some kind of glands which you normally assume. Then he started severe diarrhea, severe vomiting, and the other thing was he had become completely unresponsive. So what would happen is he was just wake up, we would probably force feed some juice and then he would go back to sleep. And we had one vital which did not come in the blood test that we had done on Monday, which came on Wednesday, which was the IgG report. And that was the report that kind of, brought everything to a spiraling downturn because
Yeah.
his vitals were 20 times higher. He was 186 when he should have been on the parameter of 20. And
Yeah.
so that's when the doctors were, you have to admit him in the hospital. Otherwise, this case is going to turn extremely serious. And I mean, the word was fatal. I mean, I don't want to repeat it now, but because my intention is not to create paranoia, my intention is to create awareness because we were off guard and this is a family of doctors, with access to the best medical
Right.
attention. And that's when we realized he had MISC, which was relatively unknown to everyone. So my point is that you realize that there are post-COVID complications that we are completely unaware of, and we are only focused on what are the symptoms of COVID and not what happens after that, especially in children.
But tell me, Kushuma, when do you think he got, and you say this as post-COVID, but just for everybody who's a layman right
So yeah.
here, when do you think the COVID happened, and do you think you missed it, and that's why you feel, or COVID came in a different, because he
No,
tested
no.
negative each time, right?
Correct. Now, see, the thing is that what was baffling to us is how did my daughter get it, right? Because my daughter was literally kept like a porcelain statue. We were not allowing anything, no external access to her at all. I reckon Nivan tested COVID positive 4 weeks before because typically this reaction comes 3 to 4 weeks after you have tested positive. But the thing is, the mystery is that he was completely asymptomatic. So we had no indication. Now, if the child had had certain behavioral changes or certain physical changes, even then my husband would have been extremely quick to pick it up, right? Because we were watching out for it. But the reality is when there was no change, how would you anticipate that he is positive? And that's where the danger lies because we've just got to be vigilant on the signs. Now, can you predict an asymptomatic COVID positive? Of course not. You're not going to look at the crystal ball and say, oh, let's just keep on doing tests with the child. You can't do that. But you've got
Right.
to watch out for the red
He
flags.
was
Yeah.
positive 4 weeks before
Yeah.
you actually, before the first fever for MIS.
Yeah.
And how did you detect that? How did you decide to get tested if he was asymptomatic?
We didn't. We did not test him at all. It was because my daughter was tested positive,
Yeah.
and then as a result of the 8 days later, when he
Yeah.
felt very sick, that's when we took the test. We did not take the test prior at all because there was no hint of COVID in my house until that point
Yeah.
of time. You know, so we didn't feel the necessity
Right.
to
Right.
sort of take a test. And even though it was always back in the back of our minds because my husband was stepping out, he was treating COVID patients, but I mean, there was no indication, there was no sign, there was no red flag.
So tell me that given that your husband is treating COVID patients, has he seen a case like that before?
Very strangely, and very coincidentally, he saw an MISC case just yesterday. And it is amazing how well equipped he was. And how much awareness has happened as a result. And I consider myself extremely lucky that this reached out to the kind of audience that it did, because immediately you could administer, the right kind of tests and, the detection, because early detection is the key.
Yeah.
Early detection is the key to resolve this. And when my husband was in the hospital with my son, he saw two cases of MISC. My son was not admitted in the COVID ward, he had a private room. And that's when he saw two more cases, and one was a 1.5-year-old child, you know.
Wow. One
Yeah,
and a half.
so 1.5-year-old infant who had been diagnosed with MISC.
Right.
So the point is, it's all there. We cannot discount. We cannot live in a bubble thinking that this isn't going to happen to our children. And I reckon, I mean, I think that's the message I'd like to give everybody, that whilst we'll all would like to live in this, hope that nothing happens to our children, but the reality is it could, and we just need to watch out for it.
Right. Right. Khushnooma, tell me when he had the fever and he was in the ward. Um, what are I mean, I obviously I'm not. I don't want to know the medication, but what's the treatment like? So they're treating symptomatically. They're treating because my point is there is no history for the doctors to follow either, right? There's no data or there's no previous or past experience. So what's the line of treatment? Are they just continuing to treat symptomatically?
So is this when he was in the hospital after he was detected,
Yes.
or before? No, the treatment is extremely aggressive after you are treated with MISC. Now, because my son had reached a very serious point, he had to be administered with immunoglobulins. He had an IV drip with him. He was taking external blood thinners, and now to this date, he's on steroids. And his entire vitals had to go in for a sonography. So they had to do a sonography on his kidney. They had to do a 2D echo on his heart. So if it reaches that point, then the treatment is very aggressive. You have to get the vitals under control. So it's a proper 3 to 4 day aggressive treatment. If you detect it early, then clearly the treatment varies, right? But I had an experience of the worst, of reaching the pinnacle. So yeah,
Right.
the treatment for a child is pretty aggressive if they reach the hospital level stage.
Right. Also, at this point, because you said it reached the point where it was aggressive, what would you tell to parents that what would the red flags for you be?
Yeah, so I think fever that is a heavy fever that lasts for more than 24 hours. I think the most important thing is to see a listless, unresponsive child. Because even in fever, children are they're pretty there, right? They respond whilst the crocin or any paracetamol is being administered. Once that fever comes down, the children are fine for the 4 hours that the paracetamol is acting in their body. But if they are completely listless, they are completely unresponsive, they are so tired, they are constantly sleeping, then I think that's a very big red flag. Rash on the body, any kind of swelling or any kind of lymph node. The other sign which my son did not have is also swelling of the tongue. Those are the kind of things that you instantly need to reach or watch out for. Now, in his case, what happened is that the symptoms started coming one after the other. Typically, from what I have read now, of course, like I said, I've always qualified. I'm not a medical professional. My husband would be able to answer these questions in a different format. But the reality is that most times these symptoms come together, they don't come one after the other. But I think a persistent fever that lasts for 3 to 4 days, which is high, I think that in itself is a very big red flag to watch out for. So don't just assume it's a viral infection.
Right. Right. Also, tell me, did you ever question why me?
Actually, Mansi, funny you asked this question, but last year I think everything was happening to us. I mean, I look after the marketing operations for a hospitality company, Marriott International, and last year this whole thing was there. Why me? Why did this happen? And I started a spiritual journey of my own, and so I was in a very solid mental space to handle the pressure and the stress, and I never questioned why me. My question was why the child, and especially a child that has you know that has shown so much resilience through this entire lockdown. All children have. I don't single out my
Yeah.
children. I think as a stakeholder fraternity, they have adapted to this scenario so much better than adults, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, it's commendable how children have just been expected to seamlessly get into what is a very abnormal way of existence and
Yeah.
really affects their development in a very big way because there is just simply no social interaction. And so my son was, adapting to that, and he was finding his own ways to keep himself happy. And I could see that there was a lot of confidence development, and very strangely he was just very content in the missed his friends a lot. I'm not denying that. So yeah, that was a very big, like, just when we had come to a point when we had fitted ourselves into this new mold, why why deal with this? My husband has been treating COVID patients since the lockdown, and then for him to come to this point when his own child had reached that point of seriousness. Yeah, I think that was the tussle, internal tussle. But I must say that my adrenaline was kicking in a very big way. The only time I broke down was when I heard that it had become fatal or it could become fatal. So after that 10 days that I went through with both my kids, I think that was the point when I kind of broke down. This was hours before he was being admitted to the hospital, but both my husband and I were very determined that this kind of emotional energy should not pass on to Nivan because he had to fight it,
Yeah.
and he was under excruciating pain, with everything that was happening to him. And I think the only point when, as a mother, I felt that it was a very big sacrifice I made was because I could not be in the hospital with him.
Right.
It was only one parent, and between us, we decided that my husband was the better parent, the more informed parent at that point of time, because even doctors, right, they've reached the end of their
Yeah.
patients. So they don't want to talk to a harrowed mother. They have no time for bedside manners. They want to talk clinical or language, and that was what my husband was equipped to do. So when he was in the hospital, I felt that, there was a huge part of me that was going through a lot of turmoil. And especially because he refused to come on video calls or he refused to talk, because I think he was processing his own trauma and his own emotions. And so that, I think, as a mother, I felt that, I mean, it shouldn't come to a point where he should feel that, my mom was not with me at this juncture, but it was a big sacrifice, I would think.
Tell me, how was it like when he was back and you knew that okay, now this is behind you?
Actually, I wrote the letter the night that he came back from the hospital because I felt that my emotions when I write that or when I write that article, I never expected the article to go this viral. To be really honest with you, it's really gone. I mean, and I'm so happy that that happened simply because I felt that I needed to do something to create this awareness and knowledge. And if it helped even one child, it was worth the pain and the anguish that he has gone through and we've gone through as a family. And the reality was, I was processing my own emotions when I was drafting it out because I felt it was cathartic. And I felt that, I would heal if this knowledge reached, parents who are struggling and who could be on the brink and, they don't have that kind of access and they don't know what to watch out for. So I think the letter proved to be a very big healing process for me as well. And I also am the kind of individual who gets healing from penning my words down. So
Right.
that was really, the turning point.
Right. The last of it. Now that he's back home, what are
Yeah.
how? I mean, is there protocol on how
Yeah.
he needs to be at home? Will there be? Do you feel
Yeah.
like there is post-COVID trauma, which everybody is talking about, that you feel is scarred in many ways that you need to address?
Yeah, I would say yes to that, and I would say no to that as well. We're trying to normalize our family in a way that he doesn't really feel the trauma. But can I say he's 100% not feeling it? The answer is no. It's become quiet. He's become more restrained than he was. Slowly, slowly, it's coming back, but it's there. So I believe children can't express themselves like the way we can, so they don't know what they are feeling. And I do see the difference, to be honest with you. He still needs, his diet needs to be monitored as well. He's still on oral steroids, so we do need to take care of certain things where he's not allowed anything sweet at this point of time. His diet needs to be absolutely optimum, and then he needs to run the entire battery of tests after 10 to 15 days, where he needs to repeat his 2D echo and his blood test. So we do need to have a fair sense of vigilance, to be honest. There is no, now there is, he's out of any kind of danger, but the recovery process needs to be monitored. So you can't just completely take that for granted.
Right. I just cannot even fathom what you have been through, how you're doing it. I feel my heart goes out to Nivan thinking how he's battled it all and he's really come out as a winner. How are you keeping him busy? I mean, how has school taken to it? Because a large part of the parents will also think that, what will his friends say or do his, at this age, the
Yeah,
peer pressure is also a lot.
sure.
So, how did you manage that bit?
I mean, I think that we could sail through this, Mansi, because we got so much support and such an outpouring of love, I would say. And I say love. I say this with a lot of emphasis from his teachers, from his school, from the children, from the parents of the children who have been consistently messaging me, sending me food, sending him books, sending him board games. They don't need to do it. Sometimes just a hello, how are you is fine. But his school, of course, he's in Bombay International, and the entire school lives on the philosophy of empathy and of love, and just embracing somebody who is in difficulty, and inclusion. And I think I saw it in the most optimum way, and I consider Nivan to be very privileged, because each and every student in his class or his friends have only reached out to him in the kindest way that they could. And there has been no judgment. They've reached out saying, does he need notes? They don't mind doing video calls to take him through his studies. There are kids who've done projects for him, and said, listen, you don't need to worry. We'll do it for you and just add in your name. To me, I think that's the ultimate lesson in values. And academics is important, but I think if you can teach your children those kind of values,
Right.
then I think it's. So I have been very lucky with the kind of circle of support I have got from everyone, and the school majorly, actually.
Right. I'm sorry. I just can't. I just be. I think I maybe feel like 10% of what you've gone through, but you've been through a really, really tough time, and really, I don't know what else to ask you, but just to thank you for sharing your story
Thank you
with
so much.
Editor and with Kidsstoppress, and really, I'm sure that with your sort of optimism, I'm sure he's going to be absolutely fine. And you're
Thank you.
absolutely right. We have a lot of privilege, and I'm so glad that for times when you ask why why Nivan, I just hope that the answer could be that maybe because your husband and you were stronger to deal and take care of him. Maybe that's why. Um,
No, it's also probably he had it in his destiny to help someone, right? I think it's amazing if you can go through a life-changing experience and create some, even a minute difference. I think I feel that he's lucky if he got an opportunity to do that in his life, and we got an opportunity as parents to create that sense of awareness. Then I think everything was worth it.